I just sped-run my first assignment task for COMM1120, and I'm going to be sharing my thought processes I had during it. Okay, so I started off by opening the assessment guide, which has all the criteria, and I opened another tab to get the marking criteria open. And the first thing I did was make a draft docs and pasted in all the questions that I needed. And for context, this was a reflection task with a 600-word-ish soft limit, so it's nothing that intensive or anything that needs research, which is why I just dug straight into it and I didn't need to search anything up on Google. So I pasted all the questions, and in the draft I answered them briefly to refer back to for my final document that I would work on. And as you can see, I'm just typing it out and talking about myself, really. So I wrote that I'm a convergent thinker, which means that I usually focus on the solution rather than looking at all the creative aspects or all the creative ideas or elements that are available. That's the general definition of it, and that's what they wanted from us, to know if we're a convergent or divergent thinker, and what makes you think that, how that affects you, the goods and bads of it, and what you're gonna do about it, basically. So I finished the draft pretty quickly, and I immediately started working on the actual document that I would later convert to a Word doc and submit. And I used my draft points to formulate my ideas and sentences, and it was pretty easy because you don't need to do research for this. You don't need to have an argument, and the structure is pretty flexible. I chose to do it in a discursive style because they explicitly mentioned don't do a question and answer sort of format. So I just thought, okay, I'll just write it like an English advanced discursive, and that's what I stuck to. So I wrote my sentences in a bit of a rush initially, and then I later went back to fix them up, tidy up some words, and really pixel perfect it. This is just me writing down my points into sentences and adding a bit more that I might not have mentioned or thought of before. So I talked about the fact that I identify as a convergent thinker, and while I have a lot of unique perspectives, I struggle to create ideas often, especially when I'm told to, like a group setting. And I don't think this was the case because everyone told me I was really creative, but ever since high school happened to me, with all the teachers telling me, no, that's the wrong answer, there's only one right answer, you do this, you do that, or the teachers that would say, oh, there's no wrong answer, would still say, oh, well, you lost marks because it wasn't really the right way of thinking. So the way my thinking evolved during high school made me especially convergent and more logical in my thinking rather than creative. And that's what I kind of dug into. And the strengths and weaknesses I wrote about it is that if you're convergent, you can typically organize stuff well and just create a really structured timeline of what you're going to do when, and you can tidy up really well. But some of the downsides that convergent thinkers tend to have is that they might become too assertive, or they might create an environment that's kind of uncomfortable and pretty rigid, which doesn't let other people get their contributions in, or even if other people might have great ideas or they're capable of producing great ideas, they can't because they feel suppressed. And that's what I wrote as my main downside to it. And I wrote that might affect me in this course if I continue asserting an environment that isn't that friendly for new ideas to come in, which is why I wrote that I am going to be very mindful of it, and I am going to pay attention to what I say and how I do things, especially since I would have a lot of responsibility as a leader. Another thing I made clear in my reflection was that I made a conscious effort to reflect upon those negatives that I mentioned that popped up in my previous course that I did, which had a group assignment which didn't go that well. And I mentioned the group assignment as an example to really highlight my flaws at that moment, to kind of show that now I understand that I might have been a bit flawed in these ways, and now I should be doing it in another way. And that's what I did. And that was it for what I wrote. What I'm doing right now is just micromanaging things, I could say, where I'm switching up words, of course, fixing up grammatical structures and sentences, but more importantly, just making it a bit more interesting. And that would involve reducing repetition, not putting too many long words together to prevent it from being convoluted, and keeping my sentences relatively short and concise so that the marker can enjoy reading it and enjoy marking it as well. And these are just some design things that I'm doing right now, and just constant word checking to see if I'm within the word limit and I am following all the exact details that they want from me. So right now, after I did that, I read over my work here and there while just fiddling around, and changed some things here and there, and just made sure everything sounded really natural and flowy and respectful, I guess, without going super personal. So I think I managed to find that balance in the end, and once I was satisfied, I read over specific paragraphs a couple more times, I changed my wording a couple more times, and just did some other perfectionist stuff. And I'll be honest, some of these aren't really that impactful, but I just like feeling confident in my work, and I just like having to go through my work over and over again, although I can't, even if I can't find a mistake myself. And then I submitted it to Moodle and stopped the timer after that. So I finished the assignment in 43 minutes and 5 seconds. And this isn't really like an official record or anything, and I don't want to put it as one because I did have a brief idea of what I was going to do for this assignment because I heard about it before briefly, and I looked at the criteria a bit before I started recording the video. But that's how I would tackle any assignment that I'm given, especially a reflection. I hope that helped, or it entertained you for a couple minutes. And that's all.